Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to start with the topic, the untold power and legacy of Queen Cleopatra. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video. But only if you really like what I'm doing here, and let us know in the comments. It's really cool to see someone from all over the world join us. Now turn off the lights, and let's enjoy the journey tonight. Number 1. A royal family's dysfunctional legacy. Cleopatra's life began in one of the most dysfunctional royal families in history. Born into the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt, Cleopatra was the daughter of Ptolemy XII, a king who was more famous for his political missteps than his ability to rule. The Ptolemies were Macedonian Greek rulers who had ruled Egypt since Alexander the Great's generals split up his empire. Despite their control over Egypt, they had little to no cultural connection with the land or people they ruled. Instead of trying to understand their subjects, the Ptolemies held on to their Greek heritage, speaking Greek and refusing to learn Egyptian. This made Cleopatra's reign even more significant, as she was the first Ptolemaic ruler who embraced the Egyptian culture. When Cleopatra was born, the royal family had already lost much of its power. Her father was struggling to maintain his throne, and after his death, Cleopatra's life became a chaotic power struggle. Egypt was facing growing pressure from Rome, and Cleopatra's own family was torn apart by internal conflicts. At the time of her ascension to the throne, Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, had already passed, leaving behind a system rife with instability. Cleopatra's rule was supposed to be shared with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, whom she married in accordance with the royal tradition of sibling marriage to preserve the bloodline. The marriage wasn't romantic. It was more of a political move. Cleopatra was in her late teens, and her brother was only about 10 years old. But this forced marriage didn't last long. Political struggles soon erupted between the two, as Cleopatra began to assert more power, trying to take full control of the throne. Her regents, who held the power behind Ptolemy XIII, saw Cleopatra as a threat and decided to exile her. Cleopatra was forced to flee, but she wasn't one to accept defeat easily. She didn't sit around in self-pity, waiting for her time to return. Instead, she orchestrated a dramatic comeback by being smuggled back into Alexandria, hidden inside a carpet. This wasn't just a clever ploy. It was a bold statement of defiance. Upon her return to the palace, Cleopatra quickly won over Julius Caesar, who was in Egypt at the time, to settle a conflict between Cleopatra and her brother. He was impressed by her intelligence, political savvy, and the audacity of her entrance. In a world dominated by men, Cleopatra understood that her beauty alone wouldn't carry her, so she used her intellect and strategic alliances to rise to power. By 47 BCE, with Caesar's support, Cleopatra had successfully ousted her brother from the throne. The young Ptolemy XIII met his end in suspicious circumstances, likely drowned in the Nile, although no one investigated his death too thoroughly. Number 2. The strategic marriage to her brother. Cleopatra's rise to power was far from typical, especially considering her marriage to her younger brother Ptolemy XIII. While this union might seem like a bizarre plot twist in a royal drama, it was a political necessity in the world of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The Ptolemies had a long-standing tradition of sibling marriages to keep the royal bloodline intact and maintain their dynastic power. However, in Cleopatra's case, this marriage was less about love and more about survival in a kingdom filled with political intrigue. Ptolemy XIII, still a child, wasn't in a position to rule effectively on his own. This created an opportunity for Cleopatra, who was in her late teens at the time, to exert influence over him. But as Cleopatra began to take on more responsibility, her brother's advisors and regents, who were effectively running the kingdom, began to see her as a threat to their own power. Cleopatra's growing influence unsettled the regents, and they decided to take drastic action. They exiled her. At first, Cleopatra was forced to leave Alexandria, the city that had been her home and the heart of her rule. Her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, was left to govern in her absence. But the situation was far from stable. Cleopatra didn't take exile lying down. Instead, she hatched a plan that would set the stage for a dramatic return to power. Cleopatra was smuggled back into the palace, hidden in a carpet. This wasn't just a clever escape. It was a theatrical statement of defiance. It's one of those historical moments that has become legendary, showing just how much Cleopatra understood the power of spectacle and symbolism. Her return was not just about reclaiming her throne, it was a masterstroke in political maneuvering. Julius Caesar, who happened to be in Alexandria at the time, was soon drawn into the conflict. The famous Roman general was there to assist in the civil unrest that had plagued Egypt. When he encountered Cleopatra, he was struck not only by her beauty, but also by her intelligence and confidence. Cleopatra wasn't simply trying to regain her position as queen. She had a vision for Egypt's future, and she knew how to align herself with the right people to make that vision a reality. Her encounter with Caesar quickly led to a powerful alliance. The two began a relationship that would reshape the political landscape of the ancient world. With Caesar's backing, Cleopatra was restored to the throne, and Ptolemy XIII was soon removed from power under mysterious circumstances. It was, of course, a messy and politically charged situation, but Cleopatra's remarkable resilience and ability to navigate the treacherous waters of royal politics proved her to be far more than just a beautiful queen. She was a strategist, a diplomat, and, perhaps most importantly, a woman who understood the significance of alliances, particularly with the most powerful man in Rome. Number 3. The political reinvention. Cleopatra's political reinvention began when she returned to the throne with the support of Julius Caesar. But it didn't stop there. Once she regained control of Egypt, she immediately began to reassert her influence over both her kingdom and the broader Mediterranean world. This wasn't just about surviving the treacherous waters of royal politics. It was about setting Egypt on a new trajectory, one that would ensure its relevance and survival in an era of Roman expansion. After her dramatic return to power, Cleopatra made several calculated moves to solidify her rule. One of her first acts was to secure her place in the Egyptian people's hearts by aligning herself with the gods. Cleopatra had a keen understanding of the importance of religion in Egypt. She knew that in order to be accepted as the legitimate ruler, she had to be seen as a divine figure. This was not just about appearing godlike. It was about aligning herself with the ancient traditions and religious practices of Egypt. She styled herself as the reincarnation of Isis, the great goddess of Egypt, and even had temples dedicated to her as such. Cleopatra's embrace of Egyptian religion was a brilliant move. It not only bolstered her legitimacy as queen, but also garnered the support of the powerful priesthood, which was a critical aspect of governance in Egypt. By positioning herself as both a political and divine figure, Cleopatra effectively connected with the Egyptian people in a way her Greek ancestors had never done. Her decision to speak Egyptian, a language her predecessors had famously ignored, further demonstrated her commitment to the culture and people she ruled. But Cleopatra didn't just rest on her newfound legitimacy. She was incredibly astute when it came to her relationship with Rome. Her connection with Julius Caesar was the foundation of her political reinvention. Together, they had a child, Caesarion, whose birth was symbolic of the alliance between Egypt and Rome. Caesar supported Cleopatra not just as a lover, but as an ally who could help secure Rome's interests in the eastern Mediterranean. In return, Cleopatra supported Caesar's ambitions, both politically and militarily. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra's political acumen was once again put to the test. She quickly turned to his successor, Mark Antony, to secure her position and further Egypt's interests. Cleopatra knew that maintaining a strong alliance with Rome was key to her survival. She wasn't just a passive player in these relationships. She understood the game and knew how to navigate the shifting allegiances of the Roman elite. Her relationship with Mark Antony was both political and personal. The two of them formed an alliance that would ultimately define the final years of Cleopatra's reign. Cleopatra had the ability to use her charm, intelligence, and political savvy to influence Mark Antony, and together they launched an ambitious campaign that included the Donations of Alexandria, a ceremony in which they awarded lands to their children, signaling their vision of a combined Roman-Egyptian empire. This move was not just a declaration of power. It was a statement that Cleopatra and Antony were planning a dynasty that could challenge Rome's dominance in the Mediterranean. The political reinvention of Cleopatra was not just about consolidating her rule in Egypt. She understood that Egypt's future depended on its ability to navigate the complex political landscape of Rome. Through her alliances with Caesar and Antony, Cleopatra was not only securing Egypt's independence, but also positioning herself as a major player in the power struggles of the ancient world. Number 4. Her cultivation of Egyptian identity. Cleopatra's mastery of political strategy extended beyond her alliances with Rome. It also involved a careful cultivation of her Egyptian identity. While her Ptolemaic family was of Greek origin and had long maintained a separation from the Egyptian people, Cleopatra recognized the necessity of bridging this cultural divide. For her, ruling Egypt wasn't just about holding power. It was about being seen as the true ruler of Egypt in the eyes of the Egyptian people. One of the most remarkable aspects of Cleopatra's reign was her decision to embrace Egyptian religion, culture, and traditions, which her Greek ancestors had largely ignored. Unlike the previous Ptolemaic rulers, who were alienated from the native Egyptian population due to their refusal to speak Egyptian and their Greek-centric worldview, Cleopatra worked tirelessly to connect with her subjects on a deeper level. Her most significant act in this cultural reinvention was adopting the role of the goddess Isis, the most revered deity in Egyptian mythology. Cleopatra not only styled herself as Isis in public appearances, but also made it part of her official persona. She even had temples erected in her honor, presenting herself as a living deity. This wasn't just an act of political symbolism. It was a powerful tool that allowed her to unite both the Egyptian and Greek elements of her reign. By identifying herself as a divine figure, Cleopatra solidified her legitimacy as the Queen of Egypt, while also gaining the favor of the Egyptian priesthood, which wielded considerable influence in Egyptian society. Furthermore, Cleopatra didn't just rely on her image as a goddess. She worked to learn Egyptian, a language that no other Ptolemaic ruler had bothered to master. This was a symbolic gesture that spoke volumes about her desire to connect with the Egyptian people. While her predecessors had used Greek as their primary language, Cleopatra's decision to learn and speak Egyptian was seen as an acknowledgement of her subjects' culture and heritage. It also demonstrated her political wisdom. By speaking directly to her people in their own language, Cleopatra not only solidified her rule, but also gained their loyalty, setting her apart from her Greek predecessors. Her decision to embrace Egyptian identity was also a savvy political move.
Egypt was a land deeply steeped in religious and cultural traditions, and Cleopatra understood the power of these traditions in maintaining order. By portraying herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis, Cleopatra wasn't just strengthening her political position, she was creating a cultural bridge between her Greek heritage and her Egyptian rule, allowing her to gain favor with both her Egyptian subjects and the powerful Egyptian priesthood.
While she was politically astute in her use of religion, Cleopatra's connection to Egypt wasn't just ceremonial. She made efforts to promote Egyptian culture and traditions within her court. Cleopatra actively supported the arts, science, and religious rituals that were important to the Egyptian people. By doing so, she was able to present herself as the Queen of Egypt in both a cultural and spiritual sense, giving her an edge over her predecessors, who had been perceived as foreign rulers with little regard for the land they governed. Cleopatra's ability to balance her Greek heritage with her strategic embrace of Egyptian identity was key to her power. She was both a ruler of Egypt and a symbol of its enduring legacy. In an era when so many rulers relied on brute force and military might, Cleopatra's success lay in her intellectual, diplomatic, and cultural savvy. She understood that ruling Egypt required more than just military power. It required the ability to command respect and loyalty from the people she ruled. And in her case, that loyalty came not just from her alliances with powerful Roman figures, but from her authentic connection to Egypt's ancient identity. Number 5. The power of multilingualism. One of Cleopatra's most remarkable skills was her ability to speak multiple languages, at least 9 by many historical accounts. In an era where most rulers only spoke 1 or 2 languages, Cleopatra's multilingualism set her apart as a diplomatic powerhouse. But this wasn't just about showing off or impressing foreign diplomats. Her linguistic abilities were a vital tool in her political arsenal, allowing her to connect with a variety of people and navigate complex international relationships with ease. While the Ptolemies had long ruled Egypt without learning the local language, Cleopatra understood the importance of communication in maintaining control over her diverse kingdom. Egypt, at the time, was a cultural crossroads, with influences from Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, and Roman societies, among others. By speaking the languages of these cultures, Cleopatra was able to directly communicate with the people in their native tongues, which not only reinforced her legitimacy, but also demonstrated her respect for their cultures. Her fluency in Egyptian was particularly significant as it allowed her to engage with her subjects in a way that no other Ptolemaic ruler had. The Egyptians had long resented the Greek-speaking Ptolemaic dynasty for not learning their language, seeing it as a sign of disrespect and cultural alienation. Cleopatra's decision to speak Egyptian was a powerful gesture of solidarity, showing that she was not merely a foreign queen ruling over Egypt, but a monarch who genuinely cared about the well-being of her people. This not only made her more relatable to the Egyptian populace, but also helped her win over key political figures, including the Egyptian priests, who held considerable sway in society. However, Cleopatra's multilingual abilities weren't just a domestic asset. They were also critical in her dealings with foreign powers. She was able to speak fluently with Roman senators, diplomats, and generals, making her a formidable player in Roman politics. When Julius Caesar and Mark Antony came to Egypt, Cleopatra didn't need an interpreter to communicate with them. She could engage with them directly in Latin. This gave her a unique advantage in negotiations, allowing her to control the conversation and assert her own terms, without relying on intermediaries who might misinterpret her words. Cleopatra's linguistic skills also played a role in her diplomatic dealings with the Ethiopians, Hebrews, and other neighboring peoples. While most rulers would have relied on translators to communicate with foreign diplomats, Cleopatra could do so herself, ensuring that nothing was lost in translation. In an age when power was often determined by the ability to form strategic alliances, Being able to speak multiple languages gave Cleopatra a significant edge in the delicate game of diplomacy. Her linguistic talent wasn't just practical. It also served as a demonstration of her intelligence and cultural sophistication. In an era where many rulers relied on brute force or military might to maintain power, Cleopatra's ability to negotiate and influence through words was a testament to her intellectual prowess. She didn't just use her beauty to captivate others. She used her sharp mind and linguistic skills to outmaneuver her political rivals. Imagine a tense diplomatic meeting with a Roman envoy, where Cleopatra, with a mere flick of her wrist, shifts from Greek to Latin, then to Egyptian, depending on who she's addressing. This was the kind of power Cleopatra wielded. She wasn't just a ruler, she was a master of communication. Whether she was negotiating military alliances, securing trade agreements, or charming Roman senators, Cleopatra's linguistic skills were an indispensable part of her success. Her multilingualism also made her an effective cultural mediator, able to navigate the complexities of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman identities with ease. She understood that in a world where borders and allegiances were constantly shifting, being able to communicate across cultural lines was essential to maintaining power. Cleopatra's ability to speak multiple languages allowed her to transcend political and cultural boundaries, making her a uniquely influential figure in the ancient world. Number 6. The legendary Pearl Incident. One of the most infamous tales surrounding Cleopatra is the so-called Pearl Incident, a story that perfectly encapsulates her flair for drama, extravagance, and political savvy. The incident involves a bet between Cleopatra and Mark Antony, and its outcome remains one of the most talked-about examples of Cleopatra's extravagant use of wealth and power to make a statement. The story goes that Cleopatra, ever the strategic player, was hosting Mark Antony for a lavish banquet. As the evening progressed, Antony, perhaps feeling a bit cocky, challenged Cleopatra to prove she could host the most expensive banquet in history. He probably thought it would be a simple flex, a game of one-upmanship among the elite. But Cleopatra, ever the master of spectacle, took the challenge to a whole new level. The next day, Cleopatra presented what appeared to be a modest meal, nothing too extravagant at first glance. Mark Antony, likely expecting an over-the-top display of opulence, raised an eyebrow at the simplicity of the offering. This, he thought, was supposed to be the most expensive banquet in history? But Cleopatra was just getting started. Calmly, she retrieved one of her prized pearl earrings, enormous and flawless, worth a fortune in its own right. She then dropped the pearl into a goblet of vinegar, a simple drink, yet one that would become the centerpiece of this dramatic moment. With a theatrical flourish, Cleopatra allowed the pearl to dissolve in the acidic liquid. The pearl, an item so valuable it could easily finance an entire kingdom, was no longer a piece of jewelry, but rather a symbol of Cleopatra's boldness and her unrivaled extravagance. As the pearl dissolved, Cleopatra reportedly drank the entire goblet, pearl and all, maintaining eye contact with Antony the entire time. This act was a demonstration of Cleopatra's complete mastery over both spectacle and politics. She didn't just win a bet, she made a statement. By casually drinking the dissolved pearl, she reminded Antony, and everyone watching, that her wealth and power were unmatched. It was a direct challenge to the excesses of Rome, a symbol of her refusal to be outdone. Cleopatra wasn't just playing a game of wealth, she was sending a message that no one, not even the great Mark Antony, could top her. The incident wasn't just about flaunting wealth, it was a performance, a carefully choreographed act designed to display Cleopatra's control over not only material riches, but also the public narrative. The idea that Cleopatra could casually consume a priceless jewel showed her confidence in her own power and resources. It was also a masterstroke of branding. In a world where appearances meant everything, Cleopatra's act was a brilliant piece of self-promotion, turning the pearl into a symbol of her regal flair and influence. But there's more to this incident than just the dramatic spectacle. It was, in many ways, a reflection of Cleopatra's relationship with Rome and her ability to manipulate public perception. She wasn't just the Queen of Egypt. She was the Queen of Drama, and every action she took had far-reaching implications. She was keenly aware that the way she presented herself to the Roman world mattered, and the Pearl incident was one of many ways she crafted her public image. It wasn't just about showing wealth. It was about asserting dominance in a world dominated by men. Mark Antony, for all his power and military prowess, was left with little to do but concede defeat. Cleopatra's performance had not only won her the bet, but it had also demonstrated to him, and to anyone watching, that she was a force to be reckoned with. The incident became legendary, not just because of the sheer audacity of the act, but because it embodied everything Cleopatra stood for: extravagance, intelligence, and the sheer determination to rule on her own terms. Number 7. Beauty, power, and image control. Cleopatra is often remembered for her beauty, but what is often overlooked is how she expertly weaponized her image to further her political ambitions. Her beauty routines were not just about vanity. They were calculated performances designed to project power, control, and divine authority. Cleopatra understood that in a world where women were often limited to roles of ornamentation and submission, beauty could be a tool for survival and dominance. One of the most famous aspects of Cleopatra's beauty regimen was her use of donkey milk baths. Yes, donkey milk. Cleopatra allegedly bathed in sour donkey milk, a treatment believed to have skin-softening and exfoliating properties due to the lactic acid found in milk. This wasn't just a personal indulgence, it was a display of wealth and opulence, a way for Cleopatra to reinforce her image as a queen who was beyond the reach of ordinary people. Imagine the extravagance required to keep hundreds of donkeys on standby for the sole purpose of producing milk for the queen's baths. It was a symbol of her power, an unspoken declaration that her beauty was so important it required the resources of an entire kingdom. But Cleopatra's beauty wasn't just about luxurious baths and skincare routines. It was about crafting an image that served her political interests. Her makeup, for instance, was meticulously applied with a calculated intent. Cleopatra was famous for her iconic eyeliner, which was not just an aesthetic choice, but also a political one. The bold, dramatic eye makeup she wore, often styled to resemble the Eye of Horus, a symbol of protection and power in ancient Egypt, reinforced her image as both a divine figure and a ruler who commanded respect. She understood that every aspect of her appearance could send a message, and she used her beauty as a form of communication. Her beauty was not just about personal allure, it was about presenting herself as a goddess. Cleopatra's carefully crafted public image positioned her as the living embodiment of the goddess Isis, the most powerful and revered deity in Egypt. Her clothing, jewelry, and even her perfume were all designed to reinforce this divine persona. She wasn't just the Queen of Egypt, she was a divine figure, and every aspect of her appearance was intended to communicate that. This connection to divinity was also evident in Cleopatra's use of perfume. She was known for her exquisite, custom-made perfumes, which were created from rare and exotic ingredients, including resins, flowers, and spices. Cleopatra's perfumes were so powerful that they became a signature of her reign, with her ships even carrying large quantities of perfume to Rome. Cleopatra's perfumes were not just about fragrance, they were an extension of her image, reinforcing her status as a ruler whose scent was as intoxicating as her power. While Cleopatra's beauty routines may seem extravagant, they were strategic. In a world where women had little control over their political fate, Cleopatra understood that controlling her image was an essential part of her power. Every detail of her appearance was crafted to serve a purpose, whether to assert her authority, invoke her divine status, or simply remind the world that she was a force to be reckoned with. Her beauty, however, was not just about personal empowerment. It was also about influence. Cleopatra used her looks to charm powerful men, but she also used them to control the narrative. She knew how to seduce and manipulate with a glance, a smile, or a perfectly timed entrance. She wasn't just a queen, she was a master of perception, using her image to maintain and consolidate her power. Cleopatra's beauty routines were, in essence, an extension of her political strategy. While she may have been admired for her looks, it was her ability to control the way the world saw her that truly made her a legend. Her beauty was not just skin deep. It was a powerful tool she wielded with precision and intelligence. Number 8. Her alliances with Rome's most powerful men. Cleopatra's alliances with two of Rome's most powerful leaders, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, were pivotal to her rule and to the fate of Egypt. These alliances were not merely romantic flings. They were strategic, well-calculated political moves that helped Cleopatra secure and maintain power in a turbulent era. In the ancient world, alliances were often more important than military victories, and Cleopatra was a master at forging them with the most influential figures of her time. Cleopatra's first major Roman alliance was with Julius Caesar. When Caesar arrived in Egypt in 48 BCE to settle a dispute between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII, Cleopatra seized the opportunity. With her brother's regents in control, Cleopatra was technically exiled from Alexandria, but she knew that Caesar was the key to reclaiming her throne. She orchestrated a dramatic return, smuggling herself into Caesar's presence in a carpet. This was no ordinary entrance. It was a calculated statement that Cleopatra was a force to be reckoned with. Caesar, who had been involved in Roman civil wars and was seeking an ally in Egypt, was immediately captivated by Cleopatra. Their relationship, both political and personal, solidified Cleopatra's position on the throne. Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Caesarion, whom she claimed was Caesar's child, and this cemented the bond between the two. Caesar, for his part, saw the benefit of supporting Cleopatra. She controlled Egypt, a wealthy and strategically important kingdom, and her backing could strengthen his position in Rome. The political consequences of their relationship were far-reaching. Cleopatra's alliance with Caesar not only solidified her rule over Egypt, but also put her in a strong position in relation to Rome. Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE left Cleopatra vulnerable once again, but she quickly found a new Roman partner in Mark Antony, one of Caesar's closest allies. Mark Antony's relationship with Cleopatra was even more politically charged than her affair with Caesar. After Caesar's death, Antony, along with Caesar's supporters, was engaged in a power struggle with Octavian, the future Augustus, for control of Rome. During this time, Cleopatra saw an opportunity to form another alliance, this time with Antony, who was both a military leader and a member of the powerful Second Triumvirate. Antony was deeply involved in Roman politics, and aligning herself with him was a way for Cleopatra to further Egypt's interests. The partnership between Cleopatra and Mark Antony went beyond romance. It was a political and military alliance that had significant implications for both Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra and Antony had children together, and they declared their offspring as the heirs to both Roman and Egyptian thrones. This move, known as the Donations of Alexandria, was a symbolic act that not only reinforced their alliance, but also presented a vision of a united Roman-Egyptian empire. Cleopatra's children were granted territories in the east, and Antony's forces were strengthened by Cleopatra's resources, including Egypt's vast wealth and strategic position. However, their alliance was also a point of contention in Rome. Many in the Roman Senate viewed Antony's relationship with Cleopatra as a threat to Rome's power and stability. Antony's decision to give lands to Cleopatra's children and his involvement with her led to accusations that he was abandoning Rome in favor of Egypt. This infuriated Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, who saw the growing power of Cleopatra and Antony as a direct challenge to his own ambitions. The political drama that unfolded between Antony, Octavian, and Cleopatra culminated in the famous Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. The naval battle was a decisive moment in the struggle for control of Rome. Cleopatra and Antony's forces were defeated by Octavian's fleet, and shortly afterward, Cleopatra and Antony both committed suicide in 30 BCE. The defeat marked the end of Egypt's independence and the beginning of its annexation by Rome, bringing an end to the Ptolemaic dynasty. Despite the tragic end to their relationship, Cleopatra's alliances with Caesar and Antony had a lasting impact on the ancient world. Her ability to forge strategic relationships with the most powerful men in Rome not only allowed her to maintain her position, but also reshaped the political landscape of the Mediterranean. Cleopatra understood that in a world dominated by men, her power lay not just in her beauty or intellect, but in her ability to form and maintain powerful alliances. Number 9. The fall of Cleopatra. Cleopatra's fall came swiftly, but it was the culmination of years of political maneuvering, shifting allegiances, and the ever-present threat of Rome. Her downfall was not just the result of military defeat. It was the tragic end of a long power struggle that involved love, betrayal, ambition, and the shifting sands of Roman politics. Cleopatra, for all her political brilliance and strategic alliances, could not escape the changing tides of power that led to her kingdom's downfall and her own tragic death. The downfall began after Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE. At that time, Cleopatra's position was somewhat precarious. Caesar had been her protector, and after his death, she found herself in a political vacuum, without the security that his alliance provided. Yet, Cleopatra quickly proved that she was no stranger to adversity. She turned to Mark Antony, Caesar's former ally, as her next political partner. This alliance was as much about securing Egypt's future as it was about personal affection. Cleopatra and Antony's relationship was not just a romantic entanglement, but a deeply strategic one that had the potential to reshape the Mediterranean world. Together, Cleopatra and Antony presented an image of unity and strength, with the two of them ruling over a vast swath of territory in the east. They were not merely lovers, they were co-rulers with a shared vision for the future of Rome and Egypt. The donations of Alexandria, a public ceremony where they declared their children the rightful heirs to territories once controlled by Rome, solidified this image of a united future empire. But it was also a declaration that went against Rome's political norms and sparked outrage back in Rome. As Cleopatra and Antony grew closer, their actions began to worry Rome's Senate, and most importantly, Octavian, the future Augustus. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, had a vision of Rome's future that did not include an alliance between Egypt and the eastern provinces. His rise to power was marked by a fierce desire to unite Rome under his rule, and Cleopatra's influence over Antony was seen as a direct challenge to this goal. The Senate, which was growing increasingly wary of Antony's relationship with Cleopatra, saw them as a threat to Rome's dominance. The tension between Antony and Octavian escalated into civil war. In 31 BCE, The two sides clashed at the Battle of Actium, a decisive naval battle that determined the future of the Roman Empire. Octavian's fleet, commanded by Agrippa, defeated the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra. The defeat marked the beginning of the end for both Antony and Cleopatra. After the battle, Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, where they faced inevitable defeat. Octavian's forces pursued them relentlessly, and it was clear that their time was running out. In the face of imminent capture, both Antony and Cleopatra took their own lives. Cleopatra's death, in particular, has been the subject of much speculation. According to the most famous accounts, she allowed herself to be bitten by an asp, the venomous snake that became symbolic of her tragic end. However, some historians believe she may have used poison or a faster-acting toxin rather than a snakebite to ensure her death was quick and dignified. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Egypt's annexation into the Roman Empire. Octavian, now the undisputed ruler of Rome, made sure that Cleopatra's children were paraded as trophies of his victory, and Egypt was transformed from an independent kingdom into a Roman province. Cleopatra, the last ruler of the Ptolemaic line, had been the final obstacle in Rome's quest for absolute control over the Mediterranean. With her death, Egypt was fully integrated into the Roman Empire, and the reign of the Ptolemies came to a definitive close. Cleopatra's fall was a tragedy in the truest sense of the word. Despite her immense intelligence, political acumen, and unparalleled beauty, she could not overcome the immense power and reach of Rome. Her downfall was not just a personal defeat, it was the collapse of Egypt's independence and the end of a centuries-old dynasty that had once ruled over one of the richest and most powerful kingdoms in the ancient world. However, Cleopatra's death also marked the beginning of her immortality. The myth of Cleopatra, the seductive queen, the lover of Caesar and Antony, and the tragic figure who died at her own hand, has endured for centuries. Her legacy has been transformed, romanticized, and mythologized in the centuries following her death, making her one of the most iconic figures in world history. Even in defeat, Cleopatra managed to immortalize herself, not just as a ruler, but as a symbol of power, beauty, and the complexities of leadership. Number 10. Cleopatra's enduring legacy. Despite the tragic end to her reign, Cleopatra's legacy has persisted for over 2 millennia, transcending her death and the fall of Egypt. She remains one of history's most iconic figures, immortalized in art, literature, and film. While her reign may have ended in political defeat, her influence and the myth surrounding her continue to shape how we view leadership, power, and femininity. Cleopatra's life and death were both steeped in drama, tragedy, and spectacle, qualities that ensured she would not be easily forgotten. When she died, she was not just a queen who had lost her kingdom, she was a symbol of defiance and political brilliance. Even her death, surrounded by myth and legend, became an enduring part of her legacy. The asp that supposedly ended her life has become an emblem of her power, her grace under pressure, and her unyielding desire to control her own fate, even in the face of defeat. During the Renaissance, Cleopatra was romanticized as a tragic heroine. Artists and writers began to focus on her dramatic death and her enduring beauty, elevating her to the status of a mythological figure. This shift in how she was viewed reflected the Renaissance's fascination with powerful women and the idea of the queen as both a political and symbolic figure. Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra encapsulated this view, portraying her as a passionate, powerful woman who defied the constraints of her time. Her image was no longer just that of a political ruler. She was now a tragic lover and a queen caught between personal desire and the responsibilities of power. However, the real strength of Cleopatra's legacy lies in how she has been remembered. In the centuries following her death, her image has been transformed and reinterpreted by different generations, reflecting each era's perceptions of women, power, and leadership. To the Romans, Cleopatra was a seductress who had manipulated their greatest generals. Her relationship with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony was seen as evidence of her ability to charm powerful men into doing her bidding. This view of Cleopatra as a femme fatale persisted through much of history, reinforced by writers like Plutarch and Virgil, who cast her as a temptress, leading men to their ruin. Cleopatra was more than just a beautiful queen, or a lover of powerful men. She was an astute politician who understood the importance of alliances, image, and perception. She ruled a kingdom that was one of the wealthiest and most powerful in the ancient world, and she did so with intelligence, charm, and cunning. Her ability to speak multiple languages, engage in complex diplomacy, and use her personal relationships to further her political goals set her apart from many other rulers of her time. In the modern era, Cleopatra's legacy has continued to evolve. The 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, cemented her status as an icon of both beauty and power. The film's portrayal of Cleopatra as a captivating and intelligent queen further shaped popular perceptions of her. Today, Cleopatra is celebrated not just for her beauty and her legendary relationships with Roman leaders, but for her political acumen, her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, and her cultural influence. Her story also serves as a reminder of the precariousness of power, especially for women in a world dominated by men. Cleopatra's tragic end, her kingdom lost, her lovers gone, and her dynasty extinguished, could have been seen as a failure. Yet her ability to secure Egypt's place in history, to leave behind a legacy of myth and legend, speaks to the resilience and brilliance of her leadership. Cleopatra may have fallen, but she did not fade into obscurity. Her story endures because of the way she used her intelligence and her image to leave an indelible mark on history. Cleopatra's legacy is also a mirror reflecting how we view leadership today. She was a queen who wielded power not just through military might or brute force, but through diplomacy, intelligence, and an understanding of cultural symbolism. Her reign serves as a reminder that leadership is not just about what you conquer, but about how you project your power, manage your alliances, and control your narrative. Her story continues to inspire generations, not just as a tale of a woman who ruled one of the most powerful civilizations of the ancient world, but as a symbol of the complex ways in which women can wield power in male-dominated societies. Whether through her political alliances, her role as a mother to her children with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, or her ability to craft a persona that transcended her reign, Cleopatra remains a powerful figure in the collective imagination. In the end, Cleopatra's story is not just one of a ruler who lost her kingdom, but of a queen whose intelligence, resilience, and strategic brilliance have ensured her place in history. Her legend has endured through the centuries because, in many ways, her ability to shape her own image was as important as her ability to rule. Cleopatra did not simply rule Egypt. She shaped the way the world would remember her.